This is Right on the Money with Tom Mosley, founder of Mosley Wealth Management.
Our mission at Mosley Wealth Management is to help people make sure they never run out of income the rest of their life and they pay as little as they're legally required to pay in taxes.
Since 1995, Tom Mosley and his team have been creating comprehensive, custom financial plans to help you preserve what you've earned and pursue what you've envisioned.
In retirement, a lot of people have built a great lump sum. We call that your lumber yard. But you need a blueprint to put that lumber yard into a plan that you can build a retirement house to live in.
What's on your mind this week, Southern California? The stock market, taxes, inflation, income, Social Security, how to ease into the life of your dreams? Let's discover conservative financial strategies starting right now. This is your Right on the Money Radio Hour with Tom Mosley.
And a very happy weekend to you. You are listening to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. He is the founder and president of Mosley Wealth Management based right here in Southern California, and I'm your host, Kristin Oakley. Each week, we are committed to providing you with solid retirement planning, financial planning advice so that you can ease into the life of your dreams. And we've got a huge show for all of you this weekend. Tom, my friend, great to be back with you as always. How are you?
I am doing great, and always good to be with you, Kristin, and always good to be with everyone in Southern California who listens to us on a regular basis.
Yes, we so appreciate that. We know you're out there and you're listening. We hope you're enjoying your weekend. And today we are going to cover everything you ever wanted to know about RMDs, but were afraid to ask. Tom, this is going to be a jam-packed show, is it not?
There are a lot of people who are afraid to ask about RMDs. They really are. I mean, that's an old saying, but there are a lot of people who, when it comes to RMDs, they're just fearful. And it's funny when people come in sometimes, they say, I need to find out about those DRMs or RDMs or, whatever they're called. But it's really a subject that brings a lot of fear because it's a big penalty if you don't do it right.
Right. And there's so much planning that needs to be done ahead of RMD age, which we're going to get into today. But so many folks have also never even heard of these RMDs. So, Tom, why don't you first define what an RMD is, and then we will get into, we're going to be talking today about the current rules. We're going to be talking about planning ideas for helping you take them properly, and then where that money should be invested. But for those who may not be familiar with this term, what are we talking about?
Well, I think a lot of people know the term RMD, but they don't know specifically what it stands for. It stands for Required Minimum Distribution. When you reach a certain age, and that age is a moving target because it's changed in the last 5 years 3 times, and it's been 3 different ages, and it's going to change again, we know, in 2031, but we're not even going to address that, okay?
Right.
We're going to talk about today's age. When it's 73. When you reach the age of 73, which means this year, if you were born in 1951 or earlier, that makes it simple for you because you know what year you were born in. You have to take required, that's the R, minimum, that's the M, distributions. You have to take money out of your IRA. Required minimum distributions. And a lot of people get to that point and they say, well, I don't need to take money out of my IRA. Well, I've always told people, I'm sorry, but the government needs you to take money out of your IRA because when you take money out of your IRA with required minimum distributions that are like a cloud that's coming on the horizon at age 73, you will pay tax on it. It will raise your income tax level, possibly into a higher tax bracket. Do I have your attention? If I didn't before, I hope I do now.
Absolutely. And again, this is non-negotiable. And you mentioned IRA, that we're talking about traditional IRAs. Talk about the types of accounts that are affected by RMDs.
Well, you've got your regular, traditional, individual retirement accounts. Those are individual. That's something you set up on your own. You can do the simplified employee pension IRAs or SEP IRAs, simple IRAs, all of those, your 401k plans, your 403b plans, your 457 deferred comp plans, all of those are impacted in almost all cases, unless you're still working and you're contributing to a 401k or a 403b. All of those are impacted at the age of 73 by required minimum distributions. Now, like I said, if you're still working and you're putting money into a 401k and you're over 73, you don't have to take money out of that 401k. But hey, if you've got other IRAs or simple IRAs or other 401ks, bingo, you do have to take money out of them. You say, it's confusing. Right. That's why we said everything you were always wanted to know about them, but we're afraid to ask because there's a lot of fear, because there's a lot of weird rules about them.
Yes. And so that's the important distinction to your point, Tom. If you're still working and contributing to a 401k, for example, you don't have to take RMDs from that particular 401k. But if you have an old 401k that you've left behind at a previous place of employment, you do have to take an RMD from that account. So again, so important to know all the rules. We know it can be confusing. That's why we want to devote today to talk about them. Roth IRAs do not require RMDs, though, during the account holder's lifetime, correct?
Well, that's the nice thing. If you've put your money in any kind of Roth account, that means you've already paid the tax. And the beauty of the Roth accounts, you've already paid the tax when the money went in. It went in after you've paid the tax. It grows without tax. And listen to this, it comes out eventually without tax, either in your lifetime, if you're married, your spouse's lifetime, or your heir's lifetime. It comes out without tax during those times. And it's really a very nice provision there in that you've already paid the tax. It grows without tax. You can take it out without tax at any time.
All right. So that kind of sets up which accounts we're talking about. But the reality is the majority of Americans have the bulk of their wealth saved up in these types of tax deferred accounts where the RMD rules do apply.
Kristin, let me point something out to you as well, okay? Like you never make a mistake, okay? You are the best of the best. But there are always these solid rules, and there are always these exceptions. Now, you said a few minutes earlier, and I just want to clarify because I fit this category. My personal situation fits this category. I'm contributing to a 401k.
Mm-hmm.
And once I pass 73, and I intend to continue to work and contribute as long as I can. But there's a little known rule, because I own more than 5% of my company.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
When I turn 73, I've got to take a required minimum distribution even out of my 401k, even though most of you out there don't have to if you're in that same situation. So that's what I mean. The rules are so much of a gotcha.
Yes.
That they just come up and bite you, and you just don't want to pay tax if you don't have to.
Tom, thank you for bringing that up, because again, there's even rules that I forget about. It's kind of like, well, if they don't apply to you directly, then you forget about them. But we know that a lot of you are in business for yourselves and might be in that same situation. So thank you for correcting that and bringing that up for sure. So much to know.
It's not so much a correction. It's just it hit me, that one little bitty exception, and it hit me. And there's a lot of others that are just exactly like that.
Well, let's talk about the calculation now, because this is where a lot of the confusion comes in. How is the RMD amount calculated each year?
Let me try to bring some clarity to this, okay? The RMD is never calculated by a percentage. Now, you can calculate the percentage that you have to pay if you need to, but I hear a lot of people come in, and they're big box firms and their brokerage houses generally don't like to help you with RMDs. They'll tell you what amount needs to be taken out of that account every single year with your February statement, or maybe even your January statement. But they don't actually sit down and help you calculate your RMDs. It's never a percentage. I've had some people come in, well, my guy just told me it's just take out 4% and I'd always be okay. That's not true. Your calculation is based on how much you have in these accounts, and then you divide a factor into that account. For instance, at 73, you take all of the money you have and you divide that by 26.5, which has to do with your life expectancy table. And at 26.5, for instance, at 73, if you divide that into $530,000 that you might have in your IRAs and 401ks, you're going to have to take out $20,000 when you're 73 if you have $530,000. Now, Kristen, let me show you how this thing escalates dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
At 73, 530,000, you have to take out $20,000.
Okay.
At 83, at 530,000 in your IRAs and 401ks, you have to take out $29,943.50. Now live to 93 and still have $530,000 in your IRAs or your 401ks or all of these accounts that apply. You're going to have to take out $52,475.25. So
Wow.
it escalates dramatically.
Yes, it does. And the calculation changes every year because our life expectancy changes every year. And another gotcha is that the calculation is based on the account value as of the previous December 31st. A lot of people get that wrong as well.
Right. They want to know, sometimes people come in and ask, they say, if I wait till the end of the year, will it be better or worse to take my RMD? It doesn't matter as long as you hit January 1st.
Mhm.
Because if you hit January 1st, they look back at what you had in that or those accounts, and whatever the amount was on December 31st of the previous year, like you say, Kristen, that's how they calculate RMDs, and they divide that lifetime, uniform lifetime expectancy table into that, and you can take it out in January, you can take it out in December, you can take it out spread out over all 12 months, you can take it out in the middle and go on a cruise. I've had people do all kinds of things, and we'll talk about taking it out a little bit later in the show. But in the year you turn 73, you have to take it out during that year. And what did I just say wrong? Here's another exception. When we come back for the second segment of the show, I'm going to start by showing you how you might even be able to wait into the next year when you're 74 to take your first RMDs. So yeah, it's so confusing. But here's the point. You need to make sure you're not doing this yourself.
Yes.
Okay. You need to make sure that somebody is walking through this with you, not only telling you how much, but when it needs to come out so that you don't get taxed. We're going to talk about taxation. We're going to talk about this first year extra period when we come back.
And the important thing to remember too is if you do this on your own and you get it wrong, not only are you going to owe tax, but you could be hit with an additional 25% penalty from the IRS. We're going to share more about that when we come back. But at the bottom line is you don't have to do this alone. We know that this is the new thing for you. If you're approaching that age 73, this might be new to you. The good news is it's not new to Tom and the team of Mosley Wealth Management, and they would love to help and guide you through it. 888-930-5609 is the number to call to get your complimentary retirement blueprint. We'll be back with more important information regarding your RMDs right after this.
With today's rising interest rate environment, have you considered refinancing your retirement? When interest rates go low, you might be able to refinance your homes, your car loans, and even your credit card rates because it could help you keep more of your own money each month. When interest rates go up, it may make sense to refinance your retirement. Higher interest rates could provide income opportunities that you may not be aware of. What works for your portfolio during low interest rate environments may not work for you in a high interest rate environment. So find out if a retirement refi could work better for you. Don't look down at today's higher interest rates. Find out if a retirement refi could work for you. Call Tom Mosley of Mosley Wealth Management at 888-930-5609. That's 888-930-5609. With rising interest rates, it might be time for you to refi your retirement.
Welcome back to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and today we are covering everything you ever wanted to know about RMDs, those required minimum distributions, but we're afraid to ask. We're going through still some of the current rules, the rules for RMDs in 2024. Tom, you mentioned before the break the exception regarding someone's first RMD. Why don't you go ahead and explain that?
Okay, first RMD has to be taken out for the year when you turn 73. And like we said, if you were born in 1951 or earlier, you are subject to an RMD this year. And if you were born in 1951, this is your bingo year. You have to start taking it out, with an exception. Here's another exception. In that first year, you are able, and I don't know why they do this,
I
but
know.
they delay the requirement. You can possibly put it off until April. And when I'm in my tax classes teaching on the 1-hour seminar we do on taxes all over Southern California, I always ask, what's the big tax day in April? And everybody yells out, April 15th. Well, the RMD date is April 1st. I think it's another gotcha. It's another well. So what it means is in the year you're 73, you could wait into that year you turn 74 and take your first RMD for the year of 73, as long as you do it by April 1st of that year.
Yes.
Well, here's another gotcha. Okay, there's so many. You're not done that year. Because you've only delayed the year previous, and you've still got to take another RMD for the year when you turn 74. When does that have to be taken out? By December 31st of that 74 year. So in essence, what you do, Kristin, is you postpone taking one year so that you pay a little tax, but the next year you're going to have to double what you pay in RMDs because you're going to have to take 2 of them out in the year when you're turning 74.
Yeah.
I'm out of breath just trying to explain that because it really doesn't make sense for normal people. So you've got to make sure if you do decide to wait that you don't forget to take that second one out that second year. I've run into people who've done that because they weren't getting help.
Exactly. And you've heard me say this before, Tom. I always joke, I'd like to meet the clown that wrote that rule. April 1st of the year following the year you turn 73. It's like, is this some sort of sick April Fool's joke, right? But then that's an easy trap to fall into if you're not aware and then you forget to take the second one that same year. So yeah, again, there's so much to know. The other gotcha is having multiple accounts. Touch on that.
Well, here's the deal. If it's not uncommon for people to have multiple IRAs. It is uncommon for people to have 32 IRAs. Like I ran into a lady from Chicago who had passed away, only had one living heir, and that was her sister. And her sister was a client of mine, and her sister had 32 IRAs. She'd started one for every year of her life and didn't know she could put it all into one.
Wow.
So she had all those little bitty accounts, and we had to bring them all together. But here's what you're trying to get out there with what you're bringing up, Kristin: multiple accounts. If you've got 2, 3, or 4 IRAs. Now remember, I stands for individual, so we're not talking about husbands and wives accounts. If those of you are out there who are listening to me who are married, you're thinking, well, I can do this with all of our accounts. No, you can do them with all of your accounts, because individual retirement accounts are all focused on the individual until there's only one individual owning both sides of the marriage, if you understand what I'm saying. But if you've got 3 IRAs, you can aggregate them. Now, what does that mean? You can add up the amount of money that needs to come out of each of those IRAs, and you can take all of that amount out of one of the IRAs. In other words, they don't care which account it comes out of. It doesn't have to something come out of every single one of them. If they're individual retirement accounts, simple IRAs, or SEP IRAs, you can take all of the money out of one of those accounts. Now let's move over to the 401k, the 403b, and the 457. If you're still holding those accounts when you turn 73, guess what? That aggregation rule doesn't apply to 4 plans, any plan that starts with the number 4. So you've got to go to every single 401k. And you say, well, don't people only have one 401k? Well, normally that's true. I have had people one guy came in one time who had 6 401ks from the different companies, and he just never brought them into one IRA or moved them into one 401k. And if he had 6, he doesn't because we got him, straightened out on the right path. But if he had 6 of those, he would have to go back and take something out of every single one of those 401ks rather. And every one of those 401ks, 403bs, every one of them has to have something come out. So multiple accounts, yes, that works for IRAs, but it doesn't work for those company plans.
Right. And that's the tragedy too, that if you take the right amount, but you take it from the wrong account, or you don't take it from one of these accounts and you're supposed to, you're going to be hit with that 25% penalty on top of the tax you owe. Now, Tom, I know that they so nicely, this penalty used to be 50%. How nice of them that now it's only 25%. We still don't want you to have to pay it at all, right?
Right. Like the person who's 73 and has 530,000, we gave that example earlier. You have to take out $20,000. You would, if you didn't do it in the right timing, and you got penalized for it. And there are some ways that they can lower that penalty if you appeal to them and say, hey, I wasn't smart enough to work with an advisor, and so I was out here by myself and I'm trying, or something happened in your life that just caused you to be confused during that time. You can get it down to 10. Don't count on it, but you can get it down to 10. But if you were supposed to take out 20 and you did it incorrectly, you're going to get penalized on not taking out the 20 in time, and you're going to get taxed on that 20, and then they're going to add on what's called an excise tax of 25%. Now, I'll do the math for you. That's $5,000 extra they're going to take out of your pocket because you don't do these things right. There is absolutely no reason for any one of you who are sitting out there to have this wrong. Here's what you need to do. What we do at Mosley Wealth Management, and every one of our 6 all-star advisors is set up to do this so well. We will sit down with you and look at your future tax situation. Now, what we do is we will run for you, based on all of your IRAs, your 401ks, all of your tax deferred money. We will run a tax report. And in that tax report, it will show you how much you're going to have to pay if you pay it out the government's way. And the government's way is take it all out. You can't put it into a Roth. You've got to put it into an after-tax account. We'll get into that next segment. But if you pay it out the government's way, you're going to have X amount of dollars you pay in tax. And if you pay it out in your way, you build the plan with us. We build you a plan. And every single time, Kristin, we're able to save people 50%, 60%, 70% sometime of what they would pay if they paid it out the government's way by paying the tax on your terms. You have a tax plan. The government has one for you. But, you say all of these things are confusing. Absolutely, they're confusing. But that's why you need to make sure you're costing yourself probably with taxes more money than you could ever cost yourself in fees, in poor investments, in everything else, because the tax man will come, and they will come on their own terms. And if you're not playing by their rules, they will penalize you. That's what you could avoid by sitting down with one of us at Mosley Wealth Management and letting us put together that tax report and show you how your particular tax situation can be remedied.
So important to have a solid plan in place, especially to plan for these RMDs, because it can drastically change your tax situation if you haven't planned ahead for them. And Tom, another horror story I heard of a man who tried to do his RMD on his own, his first one. He hit the wrong button on the website. He accidentally liquidated his entire IRA. Can you imagine the tax implications for that? On top of making that kind of mistake, the ramifications are huge.
That's a famous and a true story. The guy was out of Rhode Island. He contacted Ed Slott, who's one of my mentors. I train with Ed Slott because he's America's authority, known as America's authority on IRAs and 401ks. And he said, Ed, is there anything I can do about it? I was working with one of the big box firms, and I was self-directing my own things, and I decided to do some tax harvesting and pay my RMDs. I hit the wrong amount in the wrong column and the wrong button button, and it was over a $2 million IRA.
Wow.
And he caused himself to have to pay tax on everything. And in so many times like that, the IRS is just downright unforgiving. I don't know how he was appealing this, and he was writing private letter rulings that cost $25,000 to $30,000 just to file them with the IRS. And he was going through all the process. I don't know if he got any relief from it, but that's the kind of mistake you can make if you're not careful.
Right. And you can't afford to make those kinds of mistakes with these calculations. It's just there's too much at stake, Tom. This is why I always say, don't try this at home. Don't do this on your own. Work with a team that knows what they're doing and who does this day in and day out.
Well, and then there's one other little curveball that so many people come in. They come in and they give me a copy of the statements on all of their IRAs.
Mm-hmm.
And I ask them in the interview, oh yes, I've got this IRA, that IRA, and let's call it IRA number 4 and IRA number 5. Well, I go back to IRA number 4 when I'm looking through the paperwork, and I find out that that's not really an IRA. That's an inherited or a beneficiary IRA.
Right.
Now that is a whole new ball game.
Yep. And I was going to ask you about that when we come back from this next break, because it's important for folks to understand that those are handled differently. So stay with us. We're going to talk about inherited accounts. We're going to talk about planning steps for you to take your RMDs properly. But if you want to go ahead and get started right now on your complimentary retirement blueprint, that number to call is 888-930-5609. We'll be right back after this.
Which will you spend more money on in retirement? Food or healthcare? Do you take your investments out of the stock market now that you're retired? How do you know if you've saved enough to stay retired? Will your Social Security check be reduced in the future? How do you produce income from your nest egg to fight costs like taxes and inflation? At Mosley Wealth Management, Tom Mosley and the team take the guessing out of retirement planning by devising a written plan that accounts for all of your concerns. The bigger question, are you going to be okay in retirement? Find out the answers to your retirement questions by calling Tom Mosley of Mosley Wealth Management, 888-930-5609.
Do you know how you'll generate income from your investments along with your Social Security in retirement? In our opinion, it's never too early to start the income planning process for your future. An income plan can help you work towards creating a steady stream of income to support you throughout your retirement years. Don't leave your financial future to chance. Take control today and start income planning for your retirement. Call the team at Mosley Wealth Management so we can help you design a complimentary written income plan to help you live the retirement you've always wanted. Call 888-930-5609. That's 888-930-5609. Welcome back to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. He is the founder and president of Mosley Wealth Management based right here in Southern California, and I'm your host, Kristin Oakley. Before we dive back into this important conversation about required minimum distributions, and before the break, we mentioned we're going to get into what you do with inherited accounts as it relates to your RMDs. But Tom, let's share with our listeners where they can connect with you and the team in person at one of your upcoming live events.
Hey, I'd be glad to see you at any one of our events. A lot of times we do taxes during the right seasons for taxes because more people are interested in taxes at different times. But Social Security is something that touches on everybody almost every single day of the year. So we're doing Social Security workshops pretty much for the end of this month.
To check out the list of events and to register, as Tom said, visit mosleywealthmanagement.com. That's MOSLEY wealthmanagement.com. Well, Tom, back to the current rules for required minimum distributions, we need to talk about inherited accounts because, to your point, this is an area where a lot of folks are confused. And I know you see this come up a lot when people come in to meet with you and your team.
Well, like I said at the end of the last segment, people come in and they list an inherited IRA just as a regular IRA, and they don't know the difference. They just, I got that from my mom and dad. It always raises the red flag when somebody says that, because if you inherited an IRA, the distribution rules are different. I've had people who came in and they inherited an IRA 3 years ago, and they were 59 years old now. So you say, well, they're not eligible for required minimum distribution. Guess what? They were on that inherited IRA because the person they inherited it from was already 73 years of age and they had already started taking RMDs. So you need to be sure on that. You need to know the rules on inherited IRAs. Now, inherited IRAs, if someone passed away since 2020, you're pretty much going to have to take that all out within 10 years. And a lot of people, I've actually had people come in and say, I thought this was a real blessing, but I'm in my prime earning years right now. And my dad left me $1 million in an IRA that I've got to take out over the next 10 years.
Yep.
So even if they make no money in that account and they take out $100,000 a year and they get it all zeroed out in 10 years, that's going to raise their income $100,000 per year over the next 10 years. So it's big tax issues with IRAs. So you really need to know what you have. And that's why at the events, Kristen, at the events, people come up, well, I've got an ABC and it does this, that, or the other. And,
right.
you know, as they're talking, we're thinking about the product. And I've only been doing this 29 years, you know, and so I'm listening and I'm thinking that doesn't sound like an ABC. And sure enough, when they get in to meet with us, they really have an XYZ, some entirely different product.
Yeah.
And so it's really important that you are working with somebody that explains to you what you really have and understands what you really have, or you could get yourself in a lot of tax trouble.
Well, and the rules have changed so much. And even just the last 4 years alone, you know, you mentioned that stretch IRA provision no longer being available. This is why it's so important to work with someone who is on top of the rules and how they change. And with inherited accounts, it's so critical to get it right because the rules are based on your relationship to the original account holder, the type and the amount of what you inherited. I mean, so much goes into this. Again, it's another easy trap that folks can easily fall into and then be subject to additional penalties if they're not careful.
It's another reason we always say that when someone comes in to meet with us, we start with not a blank sheet of paper, it's actually a blank fact finder because we have to find out the facts of where you are and what your situation is. And we have to, like the doctor, I can't stand across the room and diagnose you. We have to really get in and look at your financial situation, the statements and where the money is, whether it's gained, whether it's a taxable account or a tax deferred account. There are so many questions that we need to go through. And you say, well, you know, that just discourages me from doing it. Well, that's putting your head in the sand. That's really saying what I don't know won't hurt me. But when it comes to taxes, what you don't know can kill you financially. So that's why it's so important that you get something done, that you know what's going on, especially when it comes to required minimum distributions.
And that you have a solid plan in place for how you're going to take your RMDs properly, which we're going to get to. But again, if you want to go ahead and get started to set up your time for your own complimentary retirement blueprint, simply call 888-930-5609. So Tom, some planning ideas for these RMDs. What you got for us?
Well, people come in and they want to know, how do we take them? And they want to say, can we take them at the first of the year? Can we take them at the last of the year? Can we take them each quarter? Can we take them monthly? And the answer is yes, 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 yes. You can take them pretty much any way you want to take them, as long as you make sure you take them. A lot of people set up an automatic distribution and it just dumps into their financial institution, and that ensures that you're never going to miss that RMD deadline, and it dumps into that. Now it's taxable, so you're going to have to pay tax on it, and that financial institution is going to probably put that money into a money market or some kind of interest earning account, and guess what? That is taxable as well as it grows during the year. So yes, you're going to pay tax on that RMD, and then you're going to have to put it into an account where it's going to be taxed again. So I just, don't kill the messenger. I'm just here to tell you, you cannot turn around, and a lot of people come in and say, well, I'm going to put my distributions into a Roth. And I have to tell them, no, you're not unless you have earned income up to the amount that you put into the Roth to the limit. And so, you've got to put it into another account that the government's going to be able to tax again.
Yep. Gosh, again, so much to know, so much to plan for. I'm curious about the timing. You and I have talked about this off the air. There's a debate for some people saying take your RMDs earlier in the year just to avoid the year-end rush, to avoid potential mistakes, etc. But I've also heard people use the argument you should wait till later in the year to allow your money to grow and compound more on itself. What do you say to people when they ask you specifically about the timing?
Well, the timing, let's take the idea that you can wait till the end of the year and allow it to grow. Historically, I read a statistic recently, and it's about 70 to 75% of the time, the market does grow. So in a situation where you have your money in the market, the RMD is determined by what was in there on December 31st. You don't take it out in January, February, March. You wait until, let's say, December to take it out for that year. Then if the market does grow, then you're in the money because the amount doesn't continue to grow after it's set based on the amount that was in there on December 31st. So if the market's up, you win.
Right.
But guess what? If the market's down, you lose by waiting because you, instead of taking it out early, you've just waited till, let's say it went down 50% like it did in and around the year of 2008. Then you're really going to have to take out a big chunk of what's left at the end of the year in December if you've had a big downturn in the market. So it's amazing. You're gambling a little bit and the odds are in your favor to wait, but you need to take it when you need it. Some people need it for income. Some people need it for trips. Some people don't need it and they have to take it out. So your situation is different than anybody else's situation.
Absolutely. Well, a quick personal story. So this year, my in-laws were wanting to gift some money to family, and they were wondering which account to pull from and when. And we advised them to go ahead and do their RMD and use that money, because if they took it out for another reason and didn't use it to count for the RMD, then they were going to take out more than they needed to this year. So that can be another strategy, right? Using it as, if you have a gift that you want to give your family, use the RMD to make that distribution happen.
No, that's precisely what I mean when I say your situation is different than anybody else's situation. Now, in a situation like your family member there, your in-laws, see, they could have also done this. They could have taken all of the money out for RMDs out of their required accounts like their IRAs. And then if that wasn't enough, they could have taken the other money out of an after-tax account. So you can play it off. I would also, if I were working with your in-laws in that situation, I would also want to know, what does that drive your taxable income to?
Yeah.
Because then if you take all of it out of your IRA, which you say, well, I've got to pay tax on it sometime, that might drive you into an even higher tax bracket. So your tax bracket has to be considered.
Exactly.
Hey, all of these are things, Kristin, that anybody that's out there, we can help you work through when we build a retirement blueprint and we run a tax report for you. But you've got to pick up the phone and call us.
And that number to call is 888-930-5609. We know that a lot of this can be confusing. It might be new to you. It's not new to Tom and the team of Mosley Wealth Management. This is what they do day in and day out for folks, is help them navigate the complexities of retirement planning. You don't have to go it alone. So we encourage you to schedule your complimentary retirement blueprint by calling 888-930-5609. We'll be back right after this.
Call 888-930-5609 for your no-cost appointment. 888-930-5609.
Will you outlive your money? It's a scary thought, but it's a real concern for many people. In our opinion, that's why it's crucial to have a solid retirement plan in place. We believe that with proper planning, you can work towards making your money last as long as you do. Don't wait until it's too late to start thinking about your financial future. Call Tom Mosley and the team at Mosley Wealth Management today to learn how we can help you create a retirement plan that can potentially help you obtain peace of mind and security for years to come. Don't let the fear of running out of money in retirement keep you up at night. Take control of your financial future today by calling 888-930-5609. That's 888-930-5609. Welcome back to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. I'm your host, Kristin Oakley, and it's that time of the week where we love to answer the common questions that we're getting either from our listeners or from folks who are coming in to meet with Tom and the team of Mosley Wealth Management. Tom, you were sharing with me that a common question you're getting and hearing when folks are coming in to meet with you is something to the effect of, my wife or my husband, my kids, my family are going to get my IRA when I pass away, right? And the answer is maybe or maybe not. And you might be thinking, wait a second, I thought that was the rule. Well, it all depends on what your beneficiary document says, what your beneficiary designations have been set up as. And this is a common area where a lot of folks get it wrong when it comes to their estate planning. So we wanted to spend some time addressing this since you've been getting this question a lot. The first thing we want to point out is that your will does not determine who gets your IRA. Talk about that, Tom.
Well, many people sit across our conference table and they want to put their IRA into their trust, or they want to put it into a will, and they're only I think one or two of my over 500 clients for our firm have their IRA going into the trust because they don't have any family. They don't have anybody to leave it to, but it's far better to leave it to people. Now, many people believe that whatever's in my will is going to determine who inherits my IRA, so I'm good. And that's a common misconception.
Yes.
Because your will has no effect on who's going to receive your IRA unless it's named as the beneficiary, because the IRAs have their own slate of beneficiaries, okay? And by leaving your IRA directly to your heirs, it avoids the probate court. Now what we're saying is IRAs pass to the beneficiary outside the will. Even a trust or a will that's perfectly drafted by the most expert of all attorneys, it's not going to have any control over what happens to your IRA after you go away. It's
right.
The beneficiary document.
Whoever's name is listed as the beneficiary will always trump whatever the will says. This is why it's so important to make sure that those are up to date. You cannot afford to overlook this beneficiary form because, Tom, especially if there's been a second marriage, we've heard horror stories where, they forgot to update the beneficiary and now the ex-wife is getting the account. That happens a lot.
Yeah, you can't overlook that beneficiary designation. I say it's slow. I try to emphasize it. It's that form and not the will that's going to determine who inherits the funds. It's a form that most, and here's the problem with a lot of times, you completed that years, maybe decades ago. I had a couple came in a few years ago and he worked for Edison. And just named the company. And I was going through his beneficiary documents, and I think his wife's name was Gladys, we'll call her. But I know when I asked, I said, "Who's Barbara?" And she looked at him with a great deal of hate and said, "That's his first wife." "Why? How did you know that?" And I said, "Because Barbara is the beneficiary of his 401k. And she said, "Oh my goodness." And he said, "Well, we divorced 26 years ago. Doesn't matter. That case has been to the Supreme Court."
Yep.
It is of utmost importance, as to your point, Kristin, that when you go through a life event, that you look at all of your beneficiaries. If you've gone through a divorce, you need to look at all of your beneficiary documents. And you may be required by the state to keep certain beneficiaries. Like a spouse, sometimes in the divorce settlement, can be required to keep the divorcing spouse or the spouse they're divorcing on as the main beneficiary of a life insurance policy that they paid for together during their time of marriage. So there's all kind of things that are required there, but that beneficiary document is key. If you've lost a spouse, It's
Mhm.
very important that you change your beneficiaries. Most people who are married will leave each other as the primary beneficiary, and for sake of simplicity, let's just say children as the contingents. Well, if one of the spouses goes, normally those children bump up to the primary beneficiary. So
Mhm.
as life events take place, particularly like the death of a spouse, the divorce of a spouse, and I'll say this, it's an unpleasant thing to think about, but when children fall out of favor
Mhm.
with the parent or the parents, it's really important to regularly go through and look at those beneficiaries.
Absolutely. And not to get too much into the weeds too, but if you've named your children as beneficiaries and heaven forbid one of them passes away before you do, if you want the money to go pass on to their children, for example, you also need to designate that as per stirpes. That's Latin for of issue. So there's just so many intricacies with these beneficiary designation forms. And Tom, this is why you encourage people to regularly look at them and update them. How often should someone really be going through all that paperwork and making sure it's up to date?
Well, when they come in for an annual review with us, we call it our evaluate meeting. When all of our clients come in, we ask about, are there any changes that would impact your beneficiaries?
Mm-hmm.
Because when they've come in through the entryway to our firm, we always check all the beneficiaries. It's important that their names be spelled right, their birth dates be right. And yes, it will all go to them eventually, even if those things are wrong, but it's such a headache. There's some of people who are listening to us right now, Kristin, who are blowing this off, saying it's not that important. But I'll guarantee you, those people have never had to go through the death of a parent or the second parent when all of their affairs were not in order,
Right.
and all of their beneficiaries were not in order in the right way. If you're out there and you've been through this when maybe your second parent passed away and it was all dumped on you to straighten out, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And you probably already taken care of this, all
Yeah.
right, because you understand. But it usually only takes one experience of going through this thing not being properly done that people wake up and say, wow, from now on, I am going to regularly check my beneficiaries. And here's another thing, brokerage firms merge, like even with our firm, TD Ameritrade merged with Charles Schwab. It's
Mm-hmm.
great time to check your beneficiaries. Bank X merges with Bank Y and becomes Bank Z. Great time to check your beneficiaries. Don't assume they're going to get everything right. And think about the headaches of following back through different merger after different merger after
Mm-hmm.
different merger. People come in sometimes, they say, well, my dad has this life insurance policy. And I look at it and I realize that company's been out of existence for 20 years and it got sold and sold and sold. And we have to chase it down through all of those places to find the policy and find out where that money is for the life insurance. Make sure you stay up to date on your beneficiaries.
For sure. And this is another argument why it's beneficial to consolidate old 401ks, old workplace retirement plans that you've left behind. If you have an old account floating around out there that you haven't looked at in years, when's the last time you looked at that beneficiary designation, right, Tom? But if you consolidate, then everything can be up to date and those beneficiaries can be attributed to those accounts once they're consolidated.
Yeah, I think probably to bring this to a wrap up and let me tell a story that happened that's been pretty famous. This was about 20 years ago.
Okay.
This lady in New York City was a school teacher, and obviously she lived with her sister, and she had her teacher's retirement plan, and so she put her sister down as her beneficiary.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 2 years later, in her mid-30s, she met Mr. Right,
Mm-hmm.
and they got married. They had a phenomenal wet marriage, and they were married for over 30 years, and she was in her upper 60s, and she passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And so the husband and she, they had just had a great relationship with almost everyone and just super people. And the husband was expecting to inherit about $1.5 million on her teacher's pension and the savings that they had put aside from when she was teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And come to find out that the lady had never changed the beneficiary from her sister from
Mm-hmm.
before she met Mr. Right. And as I said, almost everybody loved Mr. Wright except for the sister.
Mm.
And they were like arch enemies, and it caused separation in the family. So this went to court. This went to all the way up through the court system, and this case went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled that the will, the trust, the marriage, and all of the other things that Mr. Wright had with this lady in the last 30 years of her life were not as important as that beneficiary document that she filled out when she first started teaching, where she named her sister as the beneficiary. And who got the money? The sister got the money. This has been to the Supreme Court so many times, they don't even take the case anymore.
Right.
They just say, refer back to previous rulings. Hey, if you're out there, you say, well, I don't want that to happen. How do I? This is just one of the things. We're talking about beneficiaries in this segment. There are so many things. We talked about required minimum distributions. We talked about taking them the right way. We talked about inherited IRAs. We talked about other things in this show. There are so many things that if you're out there and you're trying to do it yourself, or you're really working with a broker who's really good at building your accumulated value, but they're not really good at retirement things. They're not really good at helping you understand all of these end-of-life things you need to get in place for retirement. You need to check us out. You need to sit down with one of our advisors and let us go through and build you a retirement blueprint to make sure that all of your things are in the right place so that you control them through your retirement. How do we do that? We like to educate on here, not beg for appointments all the time, but you set up an appointment with us, come in and talk to us, and we will put you on the right path.
And the reality is there's never been a better time to make sure that all of your affairs are in order, that you may have a plan for your hard-earned money. It's your money. You get to decide. There's no right or wrong answers here. But don't you want to have that peace of mind that can come from knowing you have a solid plan in place that has been developed by knowledgeable individuals who know the rules, who know the ins and outs, and can guide you along the way? Today is the day for you to pick up the phone and call 888-930-5609 to schedule your complimentary retirement blueprint. Hey, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here. Until next time, be safe, be happy, be blessed, and we look forward to being back with you next week on Right on the Money with Tom Mosley.
Tom Mosley and the team have helped thousands of folks like you in Southern California plan for their retirement. Now make the call yourself. 888-930-5609. That's 888-930-5609. Investment advisory services offered by duly registered individuals through Mosley Wealth Management Incorporated. Mosley Wealth Management and Mosley Insurance and Financial Services are affiliated companies by common ownership license number OB61811. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refers to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength, claims paying ability of the issuing carrier. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the needs of an individual situation. All hypothetical examples are provided for illustrative purposes only. They do not represent real-life scenarios. Mosley Insurance and Financial Services, nor its agents or representatives, may give tax or legal advice. Individuals should consult with a qualified professional for guidance before making any investment decisions. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. Some of the information provided may be from one or more third parties, which we believe to be reliable sources, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Mosley Insurance and Financial Services.